Is it feasible for a fresh mechanical engineering graduate like myself to transition into the field of data science? The next person is asking how to stay consistent and motivated while learning data science. And what are 3 to 5 things that up-leveled my YouTube game the most? Do you think your podcast/content creation has helped with your day job? Would knowledge and real-world projects be enough in a resume to get a good job? So if I wasn't a content creator, what else would I do? This episode of Ken's Nearest Neighbors is powered by Z by HP, HP's high compute workstation grade line of products and solutions. Today we're going to do a little Q&A. Haven't done a Q&A in some time, so I'm pretty excited that we were able to open up on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Instagram, and on YouTube for questions. There have been a lot of changes in data science since the last time I did a Q&A, so I'm excited to be able to go through my thoughts and some of the thoughts of some of the people that I've been talking to on a lot of the topics of large language models and the evolution of the field today. So let's dive right in. I've got my laptop right here, so I'm going to be reading from my notes on the questions. I think we're starting with either the YouTube comment section or on Twitter. I think YouTube comments is what we're starting with. So the first question is that data science hiring is slowed down. The demand is pretty low. It's not because of layoffs. Many people might argue on this. The demand for data engineers is good, but it's not the same with data science. What are your thoughts on this? The hiring slowdown for data science only. So a little wordy, but I think the meat of what they're asking for is, okay, we see data science job postings and hiring decreasing, whereas data engineering, ML engineering, and some of these other positions, we still are seeing a fair number of posts for them, and it doesn't seem like those are slowing down. I actually think that this is a natural progression of the field of data science. Data science is a very vague domain, a vague, I guess, like expertise, if you will. And it's natural that it'll be broken down into its components and there will be jobs associated with those. So if you think about it historically, some data engineering work was managed by data scientists or even data analysts. Some of the model productionization that machine learning engineers do was managed by data scientists. So we're just seeing those domains and the individual careers break apart a little bit. And I personally don't think this is a bad thing. I think if people are going into data careers and have a little bit more of an understanding and expectation of what they're going to be doing, that's a good thing. It helps people prepare better. It helps people to be less surprised with the work that they get on their job. And it also helps employers, in theory, find the specific right people for the positions that they're posting. So yes, there's less generalist data science roles, but I think that there's approximately the same number of jobs overall. I will also say that we're entering a recession, so I think overall jobs are probably going to be lower across the board. But there are opportunities and plenty of opportunities if you're comfortable with specializing. If I was to enter this market right now, and I just needed a job, I needed to run with what I had as quick as I could, I would try to specialize in something that the market was demanding quite a bit. I talked about this with Jay Feng, who owns Interview Query, on the podcast, I think a month or two ago, and he goes really depth into this topic. So not having done any internship or not having any prior experience in data science, would knowledge and real-world projects be enough in a resume to get a good job? If not, then what should we do to get some hands-on experience to boost the resume? So if you're looking for a job, I think that hands-on experience is enough. I mean, not a hands-on internship, like projects is enough to be able to help you land that initial job. Is that initial job necessarily going to be that of a data scientist? That might not be the case. It's going to be a lot harder to land your first pure data science role without having some experience beforehand. I'll probably get into this a little later, but the data scientist role, it isn't necessarily an entry-level job. And there are plenty of other jobs that are entry-level that can help you on that path if your true goal is to become a data scientist. I'm not saying it's better to be a data scientist. I'm not saying that, that's the right way to go. What I'm saying is that there are other roles that can be more entry level, that are lower hanging fruit that you can get into. So data analyst and software engineering, generally have more entry level availability. And if you're doing projects, you can certainly land one of those roles with a proper portfolio. I still don't think that just doing projects is necessarily enough. If you can get some real world experience, whether it's volunteer, whether it's contracting, whether it's just, helping your friends' parents out with a business they run and analyzing their data, that to me shows, one, that you have an interest and a wherewithal to go out and find these projects, but two, that you've had this real world experience work. People have different takes on if you should or should not do free work. I've done a lot of free work in my career and it's paid off, and I've also enjoyed and learned from it. And some of the free work I did, it turned into paid work that ended up long-term paying me significantly more than if I had just done it on a short-term contract basis. So that, I think, is an individual personal battle or question that people have to navigate. But I personally am in favor of doing some free work to be able to get that experience that you have. The next question is that as there are multiple language learning models coming into the market, many people are using them extensively. This person is also using ChatGPT a ton while working. He thinks it's impacting his coding skills, and he's not writing code on his own as much because he's using ChatGPT. How do I see these LLMs in the future as it relates to coding ability or the necessity to be able to learn how to code? I think that you should, if you want to be a data scientist, a software engineer, you should have the foundations in coding. You should be able to understand how loops work, how functions work, even how object-oriented programming works. On the other hand, I look at ChatGPT as a natural extension to programming languages. So if we look at some of the earlier programming languages like C, a lot of the future programming languages that come are becoming more and more interpretable to humans. You look at Python versus C, and Python is, in comparison, almost like writing a paragraph, right? Or writing plain English. I think these large language models like ChatGPT, they're almost like the next version of programming languages, right? I just use plain text and I describe what I want, and then it returns some valuable outcome that is code-driven. To debug and to fix some of the errors that you have, it probably is helpful to have that programming knowledge. But I think if you get really good at using these tools, that will be as valuable as being really good at a singular programming language in the future. I also see ChatGPT as being programming language agnostic. So it's not just one programming language we use. We can use ChatGPT and I can code in 50 different programming languages. I might not know all the nuances of them, but they're all accessible to me when historically they might not have been. So I'm personally leaning into ChatGPT. I'm leaning into the large language models because I think that there's a lot of upside in those and being really good at those. It completely enhances my ability to code beyond what I could before. And if you're worried about your skills atrophying, I actually am probably looking at code more than I ever was before, and I'm learning new things. So ChatGPT codes differently than I would code. There's some randomization, so it produces different results a lot of the times. And I've seen things done in different ways than I would have done them, and I can catalog that and remember that and sort of problem solve around that. So I would argue my coding has actually improved because I'm using these tools. I don't know how long that effect will last, but it has been valuable for me from a learning perspective as well. All right, the next one is it feasible for a fresh mechanical engineering graduate like myself to transition into the field of data science? So I've sort of answered one of these questions before. Is it possible to get an entry-level job? Yes, it's possible to enter the field of data science if you look at data analytics or software engineering as a subcategory of the broader data science field. I'm not saying that software engineering is underneath the data science umbrella, but it is one path you can take to enter a more pure data science role. I think that from a feasibility perspective, there are the resources out there. There's, a lot of interview prep. There's a lot of, heavy lifting you have to do before you enter. In terms of project building and networking and finding ways to do real world projects. But I've seen over and over again in my comments and in the broader communities that I'm a part of, that people are landing jobs and they're starting from the very beginnings, completely starting from scratch, just like this person might be. So it is 100% possible. I never said that it was necessarily easy, though. It does require a lot of work, and it can be done. And, I would hope that a lot of people would find that to be inspiring. The next person is asking how to stay consistent and motivated while learning data science. It's a long journey ahead for beginners. That's why most of them quit while learning. This is something I think about a lot. I mean, I go through ebbs and flows with my own learning, where I'm super interested in something in the short term, and then it sort of fizzles out, and then I go into a lull for a while, and then I come back. And the singular thing that has been the most effective for me learning the domain has been pursuing projects that I'm interested in. That, hands down, has helped me develop new skills. It's helped me to build cool things that hopefully other people can enjoy and spectate on. I do a lot of, I just did another tutorial video where I'm working with ChatGPT on some of the more basic Kaggle data sets, but to me, those are learning experiences. And I think that there are two parts of that. So first, there's a project that is exciting and interesting, and I get to dive into that and explore. And the second part is that there is some accountability of that. For me, on YouTube, I'm sharing a lot of the projects that I'm doing. Or at work, I'm sharing a lot of the projects that I'm doing. And I'm choosing projects that I know will push me just a little bit. And, pushing you is in the sense that you're using new tools or you're finding new ways to do things. And I think that that's, again, very important. You can, on the other side of that, get into sort of a project burnout where you feel like you're doing too many of these things. For those, it's okay to take a break. A lot of people preach consistency, and, I even have the 66 Days of Data initiative, but there's a reason why I choose 66 days, where it's like, yes, you can establish a habit, but you also can take a little break if you need, or you can find opportunities to take like micro breaks in the day, right? Just watching a YouTube video related to data science is often enough to keep the gears turning for me. I don't have to be hands-on coding every day. That might have been like a big nothing burger in terms of practical advice, but, this is a journey. There is absolutely no destination. There might be some pit stops along the way, like you finish a project, you get a job, you do certain things, but your career, especially if it's in data science, is open-ended. And if we're approaching it like we have to learn this to get to XYZ, that's not going to be sustainable. If we're approaching it like, hey, I am going to always be learning, and it's just part of my routine and the habits that I do, I find that to be significantly more sustainable for most people. All right, now we're on to the Twitter files. So we have Zach Wilson, and he's asking, what are 3 to 5 things that up-leveled my YouTube game the most? So I think the first thing in terms of YouTube, and this applies to data science as well, is every time I produced a video, every time I put something out, I tried to make just one single improvement. So in YouTube, for example, I try to shoot in one different camera angle, or I tried to tweak the audio so it was a little bit different, or I tried to change the storytelling so it was a little bit more compelling. And every video, I just knew as long as I did one thing a little bit better, then I was going to be constantly improving over time. And I think I've made, between my podcast and my YouTube channel, it's probably around 500, maybe like somewhere in the 400 range of videos. And those begin to add up over time. The other side of that, I also haven't been as consistent with YouTube and doing those things, making those constant improvements over time. And I've seen that my growth and some of these things have slowed down a little bit because of that. And I don't think I should rephrase that. I don't necessarily know if it's the consistency that's the issue. It's not necessarily giving people transparency into what's going on. And that leads to maybe the second thing that early on was very effective. And for me, is that letting my audience know everything that's happening, telling the story behind what's going on. If I'm going to miss a post, tell them why. If it's too personal, maybe not. But I think people watch other people on the internet because it's a human experience and that they're relatable. And maybe that's the third thing, is the relatability aspect. Is I'm finding in my career now, I'm probably a lot further ahead in terms of, you know, like my level at an organization or how long I've been doing the work than a lot of the people who are starting in the domain, who are my main audience. And I find it a little bit harder to relate than I used to. So I'm, you know, making efforts to talk to people who are earlier in their careers to understand what they're going through so that I can empathize with the problems that they're facing and try to figure out how I would navigate that. But also how other people would navigate and bring all that information in. And then I think a fourth one would be just collaboration, you know, working with other people constantly, trying to create value for them, and, you know, not necessarily think about it as a transactional exchange. Oh, I do this for you, you do this for me. It's more like, hey, if I do good things and create value for other people, it all comes full circle. You know, I think if the whole premise of creating content on YouTube is that I'm going to put these things in the world and I'm just putting it out there because I think it's a good thing to do. I think it creates value for other people. And, you know, if is upside in the long run, which there absolutely has been for me, I won't deny that. I've, you know, created a really good side hustle. I've created a lot of other really good things because of YouTubing content. But none of it was planned. None of it was, I do this and then this will happen. It was all like, you know, I'm going to create this value. I'm going to try to help other people. And if it goes well, from a probability perspective, it'll probably come back. If it doesn't, there's no sweat off of my back. All right, the next one. Do you think your podcast/content creation has helped with your day job? In what way? And do you find new aspirations from your content that you wanted to turn into a 9-to-5? So for me, the podcast is maybe the best part of my week every week. I get to talk with interesting people that are doing things that are fundamentally different than I am. I get to be curious. I get to be a student. I get to ask all the things that I want to know from these people. And that's constantly inspiring me in my work. I see new opportunities after talking with these people. I sometimes even get to bounce ideas off of them if I'm struggling with something. And so there's massive progress forward. There's also potential for clients, for opportunities to come through the podcast. Not something I ever try and push for, but there have been opportunities that have come to me, whether it's speaking or some of these other things that are sort of related to work. What was the last part? Did you find new aspirations from your content that you wanted to turn into a 9-to-5? Yeah, every time I talk to people, there are new ideas, there are new things that come up. I am very, I'd like to think that I'm very entrepreneurial. That's something that's always been interesting to me. The problem is I have a list of hundreds of ideas and not enough time or know-how to execute on all of them. So I think for me, it's always about reeling it in and figuring out what has the best return on investment for the time that I put in. And return on investment, I want to clarify, it's not about money. It's about a lot more than that. It's like, okay, well, I enjoy doing this. Who do I get to work with? And there also is that financial component. But there's all of these things that go into like, hey, is this worth pursuing or is it not worth pursuing? And I tend, since I have so many projects I want to do, I tend to only work on the ones that I think have the most overall benefit, whether it's to me or to the community or to my friends or to overall enjoyment. I'd like to take a quick second to thank one of our sponsors, Pathrise. Job hunting can be daunting, particularly in today's unpredictable world. Pathrise matches you with a dedicated mentor in your field to provide tailored support throughout your job search journey. From optimizing your resume and application process to mastering your interview skills, their expert guidance prepares you to secure your dream job and to negotiate a competitive salary. The cherry on top is that you don't pay until you secure that high-paying job that you've been aiming for. Don't hesitate. Visit pathrise.com/KenG to get matched with an expert mentor today. This episode of Ken's Nearest Neighbors is brought to you by Z by HP, HP's high compute, workstation grade line of products and solutions. Z is specifically made for high performance data science solutions, and I personally use the ZBook Studio and the Z8 workstation. I really love that the Z workstations can come standard with Linux or WSL2, and they can be configured with the Data Science Software Stack Manager. With the Software Stack Manager, you can get right to the work of doing data science on day one without the overhead of having to completely reconfigure your new machine. Now back to our show. Andrew Ng recently expressed his thoughts about how he thinks AI might not be a threat to humanity in the near future. Just the way AI is used for doing good, it might be used in many unethical ways. What are your thoughts about the same? Is there anything to be worried about? So this is a tough one. I tend not to necessarily agree with Andrew Ng. I think that there is so much potential for good with AI. You know, we can solve a lot of medical problems. We can, in theory, create some sort of crazy utopia where robots do all the work and humans get to just relax and work on projects that they're the most excited about, and really just get to live rather than worry about living paycheck to paycheck or any of these types of things. In actuality, I think it's a lot more complex than that. I mean, AI and technology, in my opinion, is moving way faster than humans can adapt to it. And that creates massive inefficiencies in any market. So we have jobs, but AI comes along. Before there can be new jobs that are created, I feel like AI disrupts jobs that exist, and there's a gap between like new jobs being created and the jobs that were displaced. So there's this time that we need to fill before these types of things happen. I don't think slowing things down necessarily is the option or the best option either. I just think that there's a lot of challenges that come with rapid technology growth and adoption. And I don't know what the best option is. I mean, I look at what the greedy and selfish option is, and that to me is to pursue understanding and learning of these tools, and also trying to leverage them into opportunities, because I also think technology creates some of the best opportunities for wealth generation and personal growth, and inefficiencies in the market like this can lead to really massive upside. On the flip side of that, there is this inequality issue, and you know, I don't know how to solve that or to reconcile that. And that's something that is very concerning to me. In the long term, maybe it is AI, though, that does reconcile and fix these things. In the medium term, that's where a lot of the unknown is, and that's very concerning to me. I'm not overly concerned with the Terminator scenario where AI takes control and takes everyone out. What I'm concerned with is that we have this ecosystem that pre-AI or pre like this more generalized AI. And when this more generalized AI is introduced, we don't know what to do and things start to change very fast. And again, people are not adapt to change at the pace that the technology is moving. So hopefully that wasn't too much of a buzzkill. But my advice to everyone that I know is to try to learn, try to pick up skills, try to see what's coming and adapt to it. Because I really believe that there will be haves and there will be have-nots of AI. And myself, everyone in my communities, everyone I know, I'd like them to be part of that haves group associated with this. The next one, hi, I'm curious about the future of data-driven decision-making in sports, especially basketball. Do you think there are any particular areas of game or player performance that will become increasingly important to analyze and optimize using deep learning in the next years? So sports, it doesn't appear that they're super long on the large language models. There aren't as many necessarily applications there. I do think that in all of sports, biometric data feedback is going to be a really big thing. You saw like Kawhi Leonard this year doing a lot of load management so he'd be ready for the playoffs. Obviously didn't necessarily work out for him, but or the I think it was the Clippers. But I think there's going to be more and more of that. It's, hey, in practice, we want to keep you healthy over the course of the season. Basketball, winning a championship is kind of about what team is the most healthy at the end of the season and can perform in those settings. So I think we'll see a lot of that in basketball and across a lot of different sports of how we use human data like heart rate, recovery, all of this stuff to impact what happens on the court as well. I think we're now on to LinkedIn. And so how do you stay abreast amid all these fast-paced changes across the AI landscape? What are your sources of information to discern important trends amidst all this hype and buzz? In general, what is your recommended approach to not overload with all the flood of news, updates, and reports and identify significant changes in AI? Honestly, this is something I really struggle with. There's so much going on. How do I pay attention to what is the most important? The single best approach that I have found is something that I use for news as well, is to a certain extent, like I don't read a newspaper. I don't actively search for new information. What I do is I rely on my friends to tell me about something. And if they think it's really worth looking into, I will do my own homework and dive in further. There's two really good reasons that I do this. So the first is I get information from sources that I directly trust. I still obviously do a little bit of poking around, or like the YouTube algorithm will recommend things to me, or people that I specifically follow on Twitter or LinkedIn will surface things. But I find that when I get information about trends from my friends, I get a really good take, especially depending on which friend it is. And that allows me to validate that information and dive deeper. The second thing is, if you just don't know anything about any of these things and you talk to someone, they'll be ecstatic to tell you about what's going on. So I use that sort of as a conversation starter, is if I don't know what, for example, LangChain is, which I've been reading a ton about and trying to implement, and it comes up in a conversation with one of my friends, like, oh, I've like heard it offhand, to explain it to me. Like, that's a really good way to, if you struggle with conversation, getting people to really open up to you and tell you what they honestly think about things. That's probably a little more effective with like current events and things along those lines than it is with learning data tools, but it is still something I use. And you'd be surprised if you have friends in the space, they're pretty excited to tell you about new things that maybe you aren't as well informed about. If you want something really actionable, if you maybe don't have that many friends in the space, is make a Twitter, make a LinkedIn, and just only follow specific people whose news you trust. That to me allows you to sort of filter out some of the noise, and it lets you focus in on a couple core people that are really progressive in a specific space. And how you go about finding those people, I mean, there's a bunch of good people on the Kensington Neighbors podcast that have some pretty good takes on that type of stuff. All right, so the future of data analysts and data scientists, considering the ChatGPT tools and the possible similar tools on an organizational scale. So this is something that is coming up a lot. Are data analysts, data scientists still going to be around with ChatGPT, with the code interpreter and these types of things? I don't see these roles going away anytime soon. I do, perfectly frankly, see them downsizing in the sense that one data analyst or one data scientist can do twice the work of what they could before. And so in theory, you might need slightly less data scientists or data analysts than you did before. On the other side of that, companies are still growing. There's a lot of companies that are way behind the trend in terms of data, data cleanliness and a lot of these things, that are still hiring data people like crazy. So it's not necessarily like an even market that, hey, this is going to affect everyone uniformly. And I think that that's a common fallacy that people, or a common like myth that people perceive in the market. But how the work actually changes. So I think, as I mentioned before, I think data scientists, data analysts are generally going to have to adopt this technology to perform, effectively at work. Just the amount of time that I save using ChatGPT with a lot of the projects that I'm coding is outrageous. And it almost hurts companies, even if they're really concerned with data privacy and safety, for their employees not to be using these tools, because the quality of the work and the outcomes are so much better from what I've been seeing. So a lot of startups, a lot of people that I've talked to, they're encouraged to use these tools at work. Some companies are even paying for their data analysts and data scientists to be using these things. I look a lot more, my work has changed from me generating code to me iterating on code, which I like a lot more. So I'll, say, hey, I want, this basic outline of code. And then I'll go through and say, tweak this, tweak this, tweak this until I have what I want. I think that coding like that is going to be become mainstream very shortly here, where you don't start with a blank slate. You're always just telling some sort of AI what you want, and it builds in those features. I don't think we'll ever get to a place necessarily where AI can just figure out what's in my brain and get it going. You sort of have to like say the steps in the process that you want. But to me, that sounds a lot more like what a product owner does, where they're going through, talking about the requirements, building out the steps. And maybe that's the direction that data analysts and data science work goes, where they're managing projects or owning projects, and then they're checking and giving feedback on what an AI produces in those models. That could be a long way out. That could be tomorrow. I don't have any clue about what the timetable might look like for that. Another LLM question. So with a rapid release of new LLMs, plugins, and related products being more widely available, how do you see that changing roles like data scientist, data engineer? So we just kind of answered that one. Do you believe upcoming data scientists should try to shift their focus to learning more of these tools like LangChain that allow everyone in a company to do data analysis more quickly? Or is that part of the field still separate enough for the typical data science workload to still be relevant? So I'll invert that question. I think the typical data science workload will be relevant to companies. You'll have help doing the typical data science workload with these LLMs. If you want to dive more deeply into the nuts and bolts of large language models, I don't think that will ever hurt you. A lot of these large companies have challenges that they see LLMs could be fixing. And if you are someone that already has know-how about these tools, that's probably only going to help your case. I don't think data scientists should necessarily shift to learning like how these tools work. I think they should shift to be learning how to use these tools. If you want to learn how the tools work, again, that is not going to hurt you, but the use of the tools in day-to-day business is going to be where you're going to get a massive return. I mean, data science work, data analyst work, it still has to be done. It's just that the way that we do it directly is going to change with these tools. So, there's more and more data that's coming into play every day. Like, people still need insights from this. And they don't necessarily need insights from a large language model. They need insights that are prompted by data scientists and data analysts, at least in the short term. So, there's a really long question, but I think, overall we should learn how to use the tools, maybe more so than even how they're structured in building the tools, and also, like data science work, the fundamental core of it is not going anywhere anytime soon. I'd love to know how you collaborate with UX research, if at all, if you've collected, analyzed data on more subjective user focus metrics, satisfaction, perception, attitudes, etc. If so, what are the best practices? So I've only done a little bit of this. For some work we do, we collect surveys and we have to make useful information out of that. I think that survey design is very important, making sure you also have correct sample sizes, and also like volume of data, especially when you're looking at text, is very interesting. I would love to do more UX research. I just haven't personally experienced with that that much. One of my good friends, Oveta Sampson, who's been on the podcast quite a few times, or maybe just once, but she started in UX research and is now in charge of, I think it's like model design at I think Google. She was at Capital One. A really impressive person. If you're interested in this, definitely seek her out. All right, and now we get on to Instagram. So do I ever get burnt out on data science work? So it's sort of like that question that was asked before about how I balance things. I absolutely get burnt out. If I do a project, I kind of don't want to look at code for a couple days. And that's totally okay. I mean, the way that I've personally structured my life is that the things that I do for, work, or that generate income for me, there's a bunch of them and they're all different. So if I'm really burned out on coding, I can flip on a video and record it. That works completely different muscles for me. If I'm not excited about video and I don't want to code, I have some other projects that I do where I can write, or I can, organize people, or I can work with them. And I still am pushing towards something that is positive in my life. It also, most of the things I do, I figure out how to monetize in some way. And then there's also complete downtime. I've been listening to some podcasts, and I can't remember where I heard it, but someone basically said, you're either, in the world we live in, we're sort of just like half on all the time. We're browsing, we're doing these things that aren't returning any energy, aren't returning any happiness, aren't progressing us forward. Like a good example is scrolling on Instagram. And a more effective way to live is to live either completely on or completely off. So I've been trying to take this into account more. And if I'm not doing data science, I can either do nothing, or I can do something that uses a different energy source, like YouTube, or the media agency that I run with Tina. So there's a bunch of different, there's really, I guess, only two ways that I approach this. So work on something else that doesn't drain energy, but also pushes me forward, or just do absolutely nothing, meditate, take a nap, read a book, go for a walk. Those are the types of things that I find recharge me the most effectively. How do I keep up with my technical skills while not building for full-time work? So I guess it's not clear to a lot of people. I do work a full-time job. I'm the head of data science at a consulting company where we work in sports analytics. So a lot of the development work that I do, a lot of my skill building, I still do there. I'm hands on keyboards about half the time. On the other hand, I still do a lot of projects in my free time, most of them on YouTube, and that's by far the best way for me to pick up new skills. I also, as a YouTuber, it'd be sort of weird if I didn't watch YouTube videos. I love watching what some of the other people are doing. I think Nick Renault in particular, his volume of output is crazy, and he's always building stuff with the newest and latest things. So I can't recommend his content enough. That's been highly educational for me. And I legitimately don't know how he produces the amount of output that he does. He also has a full-time job. How can you best learn peripheral skills like Git or Jira for those who come from analysis? I'm going to sound like a broken record, but projects are still the best way to do this. So you can use GitHub for a project. You can collaborate with people on a project and use actual versioning and merges and everything like that. For Jira, Jira is just a ticketing system for the most part. That's a little bit tougher, but you can simulate it using Asana, using Notion. You can use a Kanban board. You can use some of these things to manage your life for your tasks. And that can show through if you can pull up on your phone, hey, here's my board for how I run my day. I think they'll get it that you know how to use project management tools just in general. The next question is about landing an entry-level tech job in the era of AGI. Entry-level jobs, again, especially since we're potentially going through a recession or traction here, are harder and harder to get. I mean, that's not something I'm going to sugarcoat. On the other hand, there are still so many low-hanging fruits that a lot of people don't do. So the biggest one is creating a project portfolio. Another one is finding opportunities through networking, attending events, showcasing your work. And a lot of the highest return things are the ones that are the scariest to people. Putting yourself out there, sharing posts on LinkedIn, doing these types of things. Those are very difficult for people. But if you really think about it, outside of the discomfort you feel, there's just a little bit of effort that goes into some of these things. Like doing a really cool project gets you some of the way there, but sharing that project on a platform is scary, but it only takes a little bit more work to showcase your work to so many more people. So I'm always thinking personally about, okay, what is the return? What am I really nervous about when I do this? What have I not considered? And I think because it's a lot of people's first time trying to land a job, they have misconceptions about what it really takes to land a job. And, we've had a lot of interviews, a lot of content on my YouTube channel about what you can do to increase your chances of landing a job. So I definitely recommend exploring some of those things out. And, I've talked to enough people now that I've learned that a lot of the stuff, it works. It's not easy, but the requirements are relatively simple. And simple and easier things that people get conflated. If it's like, hey, you just have to do this, this, and this, that's very simple, but executing on those things can be very, very difficult in and of itself. So I would be careful when you approach this in your mind and say, okay, it sounds too easy to be true. That's not the case. Like, all of the things that sound easy are just simple, and you just have to, essentially put your nose to the grindstone and execute on these things. I think Nick Singh is really good at describing these. So he wrote, I think it's Acing the Data Science Interview. That's a great book associated with landing your first job and getting through the interview process. He had some really awesome tidbits on our podcast conversation as well. And I think for entry-level people, that is something 100% worth checking out. We only got 2 more left here. So if I wasn't a content creator, what else would I do? So as I mentioned before, I do have a 9-to-5 job. So I'd probably do that. But if I wasn't involved in data science or wasn't doing content creation, I'd probably be a chef. I really love to cook. Almost every weekend I make a different type of pizza. This past weekend I tried 3 variations on Detroit style pizza, and I think I found a winner. There's something that is immensely satisfying about making something, building something, and then being able to enjoy it and consume it. And to me, that's sort of a theme with a lot of the things that I do. Is I like to build things, put them out there, but then I like to be able to watch them and appreciate the hard work that I put into them. So if any of you ever meet me or there's a meetup, maybe I'll try to cook or bring something in as part of that. I watched, I think it was on the Eater YouTube channel. There's this guy who just every day, all he does is make pizza, and he just makes these little tweaks to it and enjoys it so much. And I personally believe that that's where true happiness is disciplined pursuit of a singular craft. And admittedly, I don't do as well as I could on pursuing a singular craft. There's a lot of these disparate things that I'm excited about and that I'm involved in. But as I continue to grow and I get older, I think that there will be a time for me to sort of narrow it down and really focus on a couple or just one singular thing. And I'll be excited to share that with you as well once it gets there. It might even be cooking pizzas. And then the last thing is, why is getting into data science as a beginner so difficult? So I mentioned this before, but a data science job it's not an entry-level role. And I think that that's what people are challenged with so much. You see, there's, all these postings require 2 years of work. And, it's like the meme where, they're asking for entry-level roles, but it requires 4 years of work initially. The people that land data science jobs first are more of an exception than the rule. But there's a lot of really cool opportunities that pay really well, that are doing fun work, that are not just pure data science. I mean, you have data analysts, you have data engineering, you have software engineering, you have these analytics engineers now, you have project management, you have a lot of these different types of roles. Project management might be a little bit more senior as well, but they can get you a taste. They can help you build the skills to land a more traditional data science role. And, you might even find that you like that more than data science. I mean, I talk to Alex, the analyst, all the time. He's a good friend of mine, and he wants, when he was working as a data analyst and as an analytics manager, that was what excited him. It wasn't about building models. It wasn't about doing data science work. That is what he enjoyed the most. And I don't necessarily think it's a good thing that it's so hard to get into data science. But if you look at it as, hey, this is a challenge and there are these other routes that I can go to get to this destination, I think that you can really enjoy the process and find things and probably learn a lot more along the way than just jumping straight in feet first. Because a lot of the people that land their first data science job, admittedly, they don't always have good experiences because, companies that are hiring entry-level data scientists, sometimes they don't know what they want. Sometimes they're just trying to get high caliber people to do sort of mundane work that isn't even data science work. And, a lot of people are better off sort of grinding their axe in a more traditional data analyst role or software engineering role and evolving from there. So, these are all the questions we had. This was a lot of stuff, really interesting. Hopefully I didn't just blabber out here for an hour or however long it was, but I really enjoyed this. I'll probably try to do a couple more. Maybe I'll do one on my YouTube channel when we hit another milestone. So thank you so much for tuning in. As always, everyone, good luck on your data science journey.